Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the lay of the land. So this box I actually really like a lot. I think this is some of the fundamentals that a lot of people miss when they come into security. So I think this is awesome. Now, first things first, guys, we're almost to 2K subs. If you guys could please hit that sub button, it helps out a ton. A lot of people watch the videos and don't sub, and that's fine, I understand. But if you just hit it, it takes 2 seconds and it helps out a ton. So let's go ahead and get into it. Introduction. So there's certain things that people miss when they come into security specifically, and the reason is because everybody wants to be a hacker, so everybody comes in and goes, how do you hack? And when you search that, you're going to get completely different results than the basics of IT or the fundamentals of, computers. So here's some of the things that this covers that a lot of people miss. Network infrastructure, Active Directory environment. So Active Directory environment is huge because I'd say 99% of the population uses Active Directory environments. Now, a lot of people are switching more recently, but this is something you need to know if you're going to understand how to attack networks, right? Same with network infrastructure. Users and groups. This is vital because you might have a user or you might take a user's permissions and not even have any idea what you can and can't do. Security solutions, we'll cover those. Let's go ahead and hop into it. So we deployed the VM, or I should have. Excuse me, I just deployed it. The VM keeps messing up with me, so it just I don't know what's going on, but when this timer kind of reaches close to an hour, it just disconnects you, even though it says it's got 2 hours. So I'm not sure what was going on, but that's fine. All right, so you can see that you can already P into it. We're not going to do that. We're just going to have it on split. All right, so once arriving to an unknown network. So first things first, you get in the network. Now what? What do we do? How do we not get caught, right? So during red team engagements, you got to understand what target systems we're dealing with. So you got to understand, is there a firewall? Is there servers? Is there workstations? Is there IoT devices? What is there, right? So network segmentation is an extra layer of network security device. So this happens quite a bit. You can see here they're showing it in a very brief example, but basically you have servers in one spot, hosts in another, or workstations in another. You might have IoT or mobile devices in another. It's a way to segregate the hosts, so that way, let's say someone does actually get access to one of the VLANs. Like, let's say they walk into the building and they plug into one of the network where the computers are supposed to sit. They don't get access to everything just because they did that, right? So that's the point of that. And it says here you can learn more about the network fundamentals here. All right, so these are internal networks or subnetworks, subnets. You'll hear that a lot. That are segregated and segmented. My goodness, segmented and separated based on the importance of internal devices or the importance of accessibility. So again, you might have super important information in one segregated VLAN by itself, to where only people that need access can gain access, and that's very common. Now, a DMZ, I will tell you, a lot of companies are doing away with the DMZ terminology. I don't remember what they're going to. I still use DMZ. People don't like it. I don't understand why. But demilitarized zone, what it is basically it's a buffer in between your network and your actual internal resources. So what do I mean by that? When you go to connect to someone's net or go to connect to a website, right? Let's say that website is sitting out there ready for you to connect to it so that you can see stuff. That web server is usually going to be put into the DMZ, the web server itself will be put into the DMZ or wherever they want to put it. So that way, even if you get access to that machine, let's say you take it over, right? That doesn't give you access to the back-end data. It doesn't give you access to anything else. It just gives you access to the web server. The reason for this is because those external facing, meaning that the internet can see them, those external facing servers are way more vulnerable, right? Because they don't have to bypass all these protocols and get through your security and all that. They can just access it. It's sitting there. You can, go onto a website. It's sitting there. So it's just a way to protect the assets that are external facing from the assets that are internal. So for instance, a website might be hosted externally and it might show the website. And then when you connect to it, let's say even if you take the box, it's actually connecting into the network and it's grabbing user logon information and stuff from a database inside the network. That way, even if you get a hold of that web server, it's not giving up anything, right? You're going to be able to do some things, but it doesn't give away the whole network just based on that. All right. And that's just one example. There's a million reasons why you should segregate your networks and use a DMZ. I'm just trying to use an example that everybody's familiar with. All right, so network enumeration. So netstat. You've seen me use netstat on this channel a handful of times. My rubber ducky script used netstat. And this is some of the things you're going to do. So you can see here, network enumeration. If you use netstat, you're going to get all your connections. Now you can see some are listening and then some will be connected. So that means, or it'll say established. So what that means is that connection is current. It's going right now. So let's say you go on your computer and you say netstat and you see a connection that's to a random IP address. You might want to research into that IP address because you might be part of a botnet or something like that, not even know it, right? Now, ARP-A will give you the ARP addresses. So if you're not familiar with what ARP is, it's beyond the scope of this, but it's pretty simple. It's going to identify your MAC address here to your IP address. It links them so that way it knows who to send what to. So when you're using IP addresses to route stuff, it knows who to send it to. The key here is you want to make sure that your ARP table is accurate because people can do what's called ARP poisoning where they are changing and sending stuff to themselves. All right, let's go ahead. And so that's just the basics. You can read this. And then we're going to go more into it here. So now we have Active Directory. So this is what we're going to cover. I don't know if this was set up as a domain controller or not, but here's how it works. So you have Active Directory. It is a domain controller, okay? Your domain controller controls exactly what it says, the domain. It controls everything. Controls workstations, groups, users, all that stuff. And what happens is when you get a workstation or a computer, you're going to connect it to that domain. So you can see here, they have servers. This is the two networks segregated. They have the domain controller in the servers network, and then domain joined workstations. These are the workstations that join the domain. Even though they're segregated, this domain controller controls everything, okay? And I'll show you what I mean. So here is a better representation. You have your company name. This is your domain controller, right? This is your entire domain. Well, your domain controller controls the geographical layer OUs, so it controls all the different main office. You might have another office in, California. You might have an office in Chicago, maybe New York, whatever. And you might have these broken out into different offices. And then in each one, you have workstations, servers, user accounts. Now, this is a pretty simplistic one, and these are admin layer OUs. You might have even broken down differently. You might have finance department, HR, whatever, and they have different permissions. And then you have objects in them. So in the workstations, you have different PCs. In the servers, you have different servers. And then the user accounts, you have different users. Now, the reasons for the objects, right? Excuse me, and the different OUs is you can start controlling a lot of different things. You can control what they have access to, what the actual machines can do, what the users can do. There's all kinds of stuff you can control. And these are controlled through group policies here. So what you can do is group policies. You can go ahead, or GPOs if you hear them called that. You can go ahead and say, hey, force this person. They can only set their password to, so many characters. You can say, hey, this person is not allowed to click on the start button. You can say, hey, this person, they have no access to log off. And I've seen that in classified environments or, secured environments you may have where they don't want you to log off. Why? Because if you remote into the desktop, meaning you actually go in and you take over our machine remotely, you can't log off that computer because the only way to do it is to actually restart the computer by holding down the button. And I've seen that, and that does happen. All right, so now, so now we have Active Directory objects, which we see are these objects. So this is a actual forest. So you have a domain, right? A domain might be tryhackme.com. That's a domain, and then everything that falls under it. Now, let's say tryhackme has, here we go, thm.com and tryhackme.com. Well, now you have a forest, and the forest has two trusts set up. And what they are is they're separate domains, but they trust each other. So the point of this is tryhackme.com and tryhackme.com right here. They might be owned by the same person, and they might do the same thing or do similar things, but you can see HR and trainings over here, but sales and accountants are over here. So they have a trust where HR can actually contact sales and sales can contact HR, and they can share resources, okay? All right, so now let's answer the following questions. So I know we need PowerShell for this. All right, so what it's going to ask us in order to check whether the Windows machine is part of the Active Directory environment. So we need to see, is it part of the Active Directory environment? So let's go ahead and check it out. So we'll just do system info, and we'll say, now you don't have to do the find string. This is just going to weed out everything else. It's kind of like grep. So we're going to go ahead and find string domain, and we should see here when it loads. I notice this machine is very slow. There we go. So we are part of a domain. We're part of thmredteam.com. Now, if you ever have an issue with a PC being not connecting to the domain, whatever, you may hear someone say work group it. If you ever see a computer, hear a computer, whatever, that's work grouped, as they call it, the domain will be work group. What that means is someone just took it off the domain. The default Windows is work group. That means it's not on a domain. It's just a local computer. If you ever hear that term or see that term, it means it's not part of a domain. So keep that in mind. It says it right here. Okay, so if we get a work group in the domain section, then it means that this machine is part of a local work group, meaning it's not on a domain. So before going in for any further, ensure the attached machine is deployed and blah, blah, blah. Is it a part of the Active Directory environment? And you can see it is, because the domain is thmredteam.com, and that's based on the domain controller. If it's part of an AD environment, what is the name of it? thmredteam.com. Perfect. All right. Okay, we're going to learn more about users and groups. So here is your general users, okay? Now keep in mind, obviously, in every environment, you're going to have different levels of admins. You can actually do all kinds of stuff. You can make, these are just your generic admins. You can have people that can do specific things, all kinds of stuff. So this is just your generic understanding of them. So keep that in mind, that these admins exist, but there are people that might have admin access that might not belong to certain groups here. Okay, so built-in administrator. So this is on every, I don't like the way they say this, local admin access on a domain controller. This is on every single Windows machine ever built, okay? And maybe not ever built, maybe one of the first ones wasn't, but in the last 20 years, right? So this is a built-in admin account that's local to the machine, meaning you can't log into any other machine with this admin account, only the machine that you're sitting on. Now, even your computer at home right now has an admin account locally. It may be disabled because that might be how you have it set up, but it has one, okay? And the point of this is if your computer's not on the internet, it doesn't matter. You can still log in as an admin on that. Now, most, I would say 99% of corporate, enterprise, whatever environments should have the local admin accounts disabled, okay? And they probably do. So then you go to domain admins. These are admins of the domain controller. They have access to all resources in the domain, meaning they can control anything in that domain. They can change it in the domain controller. They can access it. They can do whatever they want because they are domain admins. So domain admins, this would be your goal as a pen tester. If you could get a domain admin, you are set. Now, enterprise admins are even more. They have available only in the forest root. Now, keep in mind, enterprise admins have access to the forest root, meaning to the top, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can control the domains that are in that forest. They might be able to control the trust that's set up with the forest, but they might not be able to control the domains. It depends how it's set up. Schema admins capable of modifying domain forests, useful for red teamers. So what does that mean? The domain and the forest trusts and all that stuff, how everything works together, you're capable of manipulating that. So that schema, as they call it. Then server operations, server operators, these are admins that have access to servers. Okay, so now this is why I say these are generic, because you might have 500 servers and 100 of them are for HR, 100 of them are for security, 100 whatever, and you might have these admins can access these 100, these admins can access these 100. That doesn't mean that they're a server, that they can operate every server on the domain. There is no black and white. You can either operate, or you can either access every server or you can't. That's where you can actually granularly change a lot of permissions and things. All right. Then you have account operators, can manage users that are not in privileged groups. So this would be like your help desk, right? They can manage users that aren't in privileged groups. So they can go to any regular user and they can change their accounts and change their passwords, give them permissions to non-privileged groups, that type of stuff. And they can start to give them basically minimal access in the domain controller so that you can start manipulating the domain the way you need it. All right. Excuse me. So now we have Active Directory enumeration. This is important, okay? And the reason it's important is because you can start to build out how their domain is built just from a little bit of enumeration. So let's say I already have access to this machine, right? But this is just a workstation on here, whatever. We can do the get 80 user filter wildcard. So you can see it's get 80 user. It's a PowerShell command. Filter, and the filter is just a wildcard. That means anything, okay? Now what that's going to do is give me a list, and we'll go ahead and do it. Get 80, and you can see you can, with PowerShell, you can tab everything. So we'll just go to where we get to the use. Now, it probably would have been faster to just do it, but I want to show you guys that you can tab, and it'll keep filling them in for you. Problem is, there we go. So, let's see. Oh, all right. We'll go ahead and just say get 80 user, and then we want filter, and then we want the wildcard. So when we hit enter, you're going to see every user that's in the domain sitting here, okay? And then you're going to get this information for all of them too, which is awesome. So now we can use the LDAP hierarchical tree structure to find a user within the environment. So what they're saying is you can follow the path. So like we're going to just use this guy. He is admin. So that's his name, THM admin. Perfect. And you can see he's part of the OU or operation or organizational unit THM. Domain controller, thmredteam.com. We've got that. Perfect. Okay. So what we can do is we can start looking at this information, and you can see, okay, so here they have the DC domain controller, THM red team, and then they have the users, and then they have, that's the user one, which would, in this case would be admin. And then here on the on this side, they have the OU, and this OU, it's THM, and then they have users, right? So that's how we're set up here. So we can go ahead and we can go through all these, but I think there's probably, I don't know, 20, 30 users. We're not going to go through all of them. So now use the get 80 user filter search base command to list the available users within the THMOU. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same command, get 80 user filter, but then we're going to say search base. If I can type, there we go. Search base. And you can see up top there, they have it set up for the CN users. We want the OU, and we want it to equal, and they told us it's THM red team. And then, so because, oh no, we want THM, I'm sorry. We want THM is the OU. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go from here, put a comma, we're going to say domain controller equals, and we want THM red team.com. Whoops, not .com. THM red team, and then DC equals com. Now when we hit enter here, you can see it gave us only a list of the users that are a part of that OU. It actually got rid of all the other users. So you can filter this out. So you can start grabbing people that matter, right? Because a enterprise environment is going to have 10,000 employees, right? At least. So when you work on that, it's great you got in, right? You're a hacker, you got in, you're doing your pen test. But now I have 10,000 employees. It doesn't help me to gain 9,000 accounts that I can't do anything with because they're going to give me the same permissions I have now. So what they do is you start looking at OUs that matter, admin OUs, that type of thing, things that have higher level access. Okay, so how many accounts did we get? So we can count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Perfect. So 6. Now, once you run the previous command, what is the principal name, email of the admin account? And you can see it's THM admin. The admin account email is thmadmin@thmredteam.com. Perfect. Now we get into the fun stuff, even though I think Active Directory is extremely interesting and you could go on forever about it. But one big thing here, you need to start looking at when you take over a machine instead of just going all willy-nilly, because a lot of people do this. A lot of hackers go in and they're like, oh, I got access, we're great, let's go, and they start doing stuff. You're going to get busted a lot of times. Now, on CTFs and stuff, this isn't as important, but in pen tests, this is important. So you're looking for these things: antivirus, Microsoft Windows Defender, host-based firewall. Now, one thing I want to point out, Microsoft Windows Defender, I know a lot of people talk shit about Microsoft Windows Defender, but what people don't understand is that Microsoft Windows Defender comes installed on all hosts or Windows machines when they're just sitting at someone's house, right? It is better than nothing. Okay, a lot of people talk shit about it, say it doesn't do anything, whatever. It is 1,000 times better to have Microsoft Windows Defender than to not. Okay, I'm going to tell you that now, because what people don't realize is, you're right, it may not stop a good hacker. Okay, but a good hacker most likely is not coming after your individual PC. You know who is? Script kiddies that go around and they just look for vulnerabilities and they just spam attacks. That is why Microsoft Windows Defender is good. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and say it's greatest product alive. I get it, but don't disable it unless you have something else going to be replacing it, because otherwise you're not helping yourself. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at antivirus products. So here you have okay, so we're gonna stick with the PowerShell, but WMIC will allow you to do the same thing, and you'll see what I mean. So here is get sim instance namespace root security center 2 class name. So what this is security center 2. That's where your antivirus product would be if you had one, if you have a third-party one, right? Well, the nice thing, this machine doesn't have one. It tells us right here down here in the notes, note that Windows Server may not have it. So it won't actually pop up. It'll give us an error because it'll say this namespace does not exist, which it doesn't. Okay, cool. But that will tell us, not only will it tell us, is there a third party on here, but it also tells us, what is it, right? Because most people name it themselves, right? They're not going to name, if it's Bitdefender, they're not going to be like, name it something weird so nobody knows. They want you to know it's Bitdefender because they want to advertise that, right? All right, so now Microsoft Windows Defender. So here, if we type get service WinDefend, right, it should, if it's on here, boom, and it actually tells us it's running. So Windows Defender antivirus is on here and it is running. Now, what you can do is you can actually run this, get mp computer status, select, and we're going to say real-time protection enabled. And if we hit enter, you can see real-time protection enabled is false. So what's that tell us? That tells us that it's not enabled right now, the real-time protection. Okay, cool. So we know now whether it's enabled or not. That's good. Now, and you can see why this would be important, obviously. So keep in mind when you're doing this stuff that if you just take over a machine in an enterprise environment and you just start doing all this enumeration, you're going to get really, you're going to be busted quick, because any behavioral analytics is going to start noticing that you're doing PowerShell commands that nobody ever does and things like that. Bless me. Excuse me. All right, so let's go ahead and look at more. So now that's our antivirus. That's a very general way to look for it. There's more ways to look for it, and you should know what you're looking for before going into a pen test, right? You shouldn't come into a pen test, take over a machine, be like, oh, I got a machine, I don't know what to do. You should know all this. Like there should be playbook. If this happens, we do this. If this happens, we do this, etc. All right. So now host-based firewall. So you're familiar with firewalls. A host-based firewall means it sits actually on the host. It sits on the machine itself. So let's go ahead and look and see if this has it. So we're going to say get net firewall profile. And you guys notice when we're doing the pipes and it's saying format, table, and then we're just saying name, enabled. All that's doing is formatting it into a table and saying, I only want the name and if it's enabled. I don't want anything else. That's all it's saying. So really, it's just like running this command. We're just making it so it only gives us this results. Now you can see here, none of them are enabled. So we don't have a host-based firewall on this right now. Okay, perfect. So you can see here, if you did have one and you had admin access, we could actually run this command and enable it to be false so that it actually would not be running like it isn't here. And then we could evade the firewall, right? Now, I will tell you that this is just a host-based firewall. So this only will work if this machine is not managed otherwhere, right? If there's not a firewall somewhere else in the system or in the network. It'll work if you're sitting on it, but there's a firewall somewhere on the edge of that network probably. Okay, so now we can check firewall rules. So this is important, especially if you don't have the firewall installed. Like obviously it's not gonna, or not installed, enabled. It's obviously not gonna give us anything. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna say firewall select display name enabled description. So we want the name if it's enabled and the description of the rule. Now, did I just type the same command? I sure did. I typed the same exact command. Okay. And we wanted to type firewall rule. Now, you're going to see there's a bunch, right? That's fine. That's no problem. We'll go through those here in a sec. So now, if you guys don't know what a firewall rule is, by the way, I should have emphasized this. It is, you have to, by default, there should be a deny all, okay, or deny any rule on a firewall. What this does is it prevents anything from coming in, anything from going out. Everything's denied. And then you have to start building rules. Okay, we want to let port 80 open for HTTP traffic only. We want port 8080 open for HTTPS traffic only, right? Those are the type of rules you're going to start implementing. So that's what these rules are, right? So just keep that in mind, that firewall rules are what is allowed in and out of a firewall. You have to set those. Okay, so here's a really cool one. What you can do is you can test the net connection. So what you're doing is, if you don't know the firewall rules, or if you don't know if it's allowed, you can test this connection. You can say test net connection, computer name, and the computer name is just ourselves, local host 127.0.0.1, and then port 80. And you're just seeing, does it go out and come back in? And if it does, awesome. And you can see here it's telling you connected true. So it actually allows a connection. Perfect. So that means that we can actually get a connection on port 80 there. Now, enumerate the attached Windows machine and check whether the host-based firewall is enabled or not. We did that, and it was not enabled. Using PowerShell commandlets, get MP threat can provide. Okay, so before we do the second one, we're going to do the third one, because enumerate the firewall rules and what is the part that's allowed under THM connection rules. So we're going to run the same command, but this time I'm going to pipe it into find string, and I'm going to say THM, and then we'll say connection, because we know that's a rule. Okay, and there it is, THM connection rule, and there it is, THM connection inbound to 17.337. So there's the port, 17.337. All right, now we can do this, get MP threat. So we'll say get MP threat, and you can see here there's only a couple entries. All right, and you can see the threat name. So it says, what is the file name that causes this alert to record? So you can see there's actually a where is it? Right here, file. So the file itself is users kid desktop powerview.ps1. That is the actual file there. Okay, so we'll go ahead over here and powerview.ps1. So boom, boom, easy day. Now the next task. Well, okay, so now we're gonna keep discussing. Okay, so now logging. Here's another thing that you have to watch out for. So it's one thing to get caught, right? It's one thing to get caught in the moment. It's another thing to have logs of you there, because you might not get caught in the moment, but they might go back and look at the logs and say, I don't know what's going on, but all of a sudden we need to go back and look at these logs, and then they start to discover you. So keep that stuff in mind too, because just because you didn't get caught at the time doesn't mean you're not caught. Okay, so now we can say get event log list. I'm not going to do that because there's a lot of event logs, but what you can do is you can actually say get event log in list, and you can see it's going to give you a list of all the different types of logs, and then you can see how many entries are there. So you can see there's a lot. Especially in a large environment, you're going to get the Active Directory and the authentication logs. You're going to have, thousands and thousands probably per hour. Okay, so now sysmon, this is system monitoring. This is another way that Windows allows you to log different things. And with sysmon, you can see process creation, network terminate or connections, modifications, remote threats, process memory. So it allows you to log a lot more stuff. Now, one thing that a lot of not unskilled, but new system administrators and things like that do is they always say, well, let's log everything because I want to be able to go back and see exactly what I can do, what happened. I want to see everything. The problem with that is you have to have the storage for it. And when I say that, if you have a company with 10,000 employees, okay, you're going to fill up terabytes of logs if you log everything, okay? and you're going to fill them up fast, which means you also can't keep them as long. So you have to understand that there's a give and take. You have to give up some logging to store all the logs. So you need to figure out with your team what is important and what is not. And that is where a hacker's dream lies, because he can weasel in there and avoid certain logs if he knows how. And that's what we're looking for here. So you can see here, this get process where object. So we'll say get process. And now, by the way, sysmon is not native to, it is a tool that you can get for Windows, but it is not natively on Windows, meaning that you have to actually install it. So you're not going to see it typically on a machine that someone just sitting at home does or has, because they don't know about it and they're not going to set it up. So now you can see what we're doing is we're saying get the process where the object, the name is sysmon, and you can see we have it here. So it is on the machine. That's what it tells us. Okay, so now PowerShell, get service. Okay, so that's the same thing. It also can be done by clicking. Okay, so they're just giving you 3 commands, 3 different ways to look and see if sysmon's on the system. We see that it is just based on the 1 command, so we can move on to this. Now, you can see all these commands confirm that sysmon tool is installed. Once we detect it, we can try to find the sysmon configuration file. So what this is you can see here, they're going to find the string, and they're going to look for the string that's basically what the sysmon config file will present. Now, the reason for this is because if you find the sysmon config file, if they didn't lock it down and you can access it, you can see, well, for one, if you can edit it, you can just change the logging rules and then have a heyday. But for 2, if you can see it, if you can just read it, then you can see what they're logging for, and you can start looking at how to avoid those. For instance, if they log anyone that's logged in from multiple locations in a matter of an hour, for instance, right? If you see that, you say, okay, well, I'm going to work after hours then, because if I log in within 10 minutes of the user on their account, they're going to detect that. That type of stuff is what you're looking for. Now, you have host-based intrusion detection system, prevention system. What's the difference? Intrusion detection system, all it does is detect. So it's going to pop up. It's going to say, we have an alert, this host, something's happening on it. That's a detection system. Awesome. Thank you. Prevention system will actually do more than that. It'll detect it, obviously, but then it's going to stop it. So let's say there's a PowerShell script that runs and they go, this is not good. It's going to detect that, and then it's going to stop it where it's at and say, no, you're not running this because it's not good. Okay, that's the difference between detection versus prevention. Now, endpoint detection and response, does both of these, but what it is it's managed by a larger system. So instead of the host running this by itself, it's going to be a part of an endpoint detection and response system. And what it's going to do is it's actually going to send all that information to one place where people can look at it and view a dashboard and say, hey, okay, we see 5 files of ran on this that are inappropriate. They got blocked. Let's dig some more into it. And it's just a working system, okay? So boom, we got that. All right, network security solutions. Okay, network security solutions could be software or hardware appliances used to monitor, detect, prevent malicious activity within the network. Okay, so the difference is here you saw that we had host security solutions. So those are what's going to sit on this host. These are network security solutions. So for one, network firewall. So a firewall that sits outside or on the edge of your network and facilitates what comes in and goes out, because obviously, just a host-based firewall isn't good enough. You need to have a network firewall. A SIEM or SIM. Some people call it SIM, some people call it SIEM. I've always called it SIEM and probably will forever. So that is a logging tool. So security information and event manager. What it does, it takes all these logs and all these events from sysmon, from applications, from everything, and it puts them all in a dashboard where it's going to tell you if certain ones look weird. Hey, this person's logged in 25 times, denied, right? That means something's going on. So it's going to alert me of that. Hey, this person's doing something they never do. It's going to alert me on that type of stuff. And that's if you have behavioral analytics involved in it. But the SIEM is designed specifically for all of that log aggregation to collect all that data and then make it accessible, make it searchable for you. Let's say someone comes to you and says, hey, I think my account's been hacked. I say, okay, cool. let me check your account. I log in their account and I can see all the logs associated with their account, and I can tell them if it is. Okay. All right. Now, intrusion detection, we already covered that. These are common enterprise intrusion detection and intrusion prevention systems. All right. Applications and services. So again, a SIEM can import logs from applications and services as well. So keep that in mind. All right. Installed applications. So you can see, we can say get child item hidden path. That will give us all the hidden folders on a specific path, wherever, or hidden files, wherever we want. The point of this is a lot of configuration folders and things like that are covered in this. So that's why. The other thing here is this one here, the WMIC product get name version. This is going to show us every application installed. I'm not going to run that here because this machine is not very fast and we don't need to see every application on here, but it's good to see what applications are installed and their versions, because there might be a vulnerability on there that you can take advantage of, or there might be something on there that's actually looking for you as a hacker or pen tester and you don't realize it. All right, services and processes. Okay, so process discovery is an enumeration step to understand what systems provide. Okay, so what processes are running on the machines, what services are running on the machines, those type of things you're looking for. Sharing files and printers. So you're looking for common network resources like files and printers and things like that that you can actually just access, right? Misconfigure access permissions. That's all the time that happens, right? System administrator's rushed. He doesn't know what's going on. Things are just stressful. And he just, okay, here's your folder. Go ahead. And he didn't lock anything down on it. And now everybody can access it, right? That happens a lot. So internal services, DNS, local web applications, etc. So DNS, if you don't know, is domain name system. It is what is used for IP addresses to actual domain names. So it's every single computer in the world uses it or uses something. So that'll be there, okay? So keep that in mind. Email services, network file share, all these are things that you need to look for because they might have vulnerabilities built into them. So you can see, especially if they're outdated. So let's try listing the running services using the Windows command prompt. So net start. So net start will show you these are all the Windows services. Okay. Now if we do that here, yep, there's all of them. Okay. And then you can see here, they're telling you now you go WMIC service where now. So we can go WMIC service. And then we want where the name is like, and now there's an actual THM service, okay? And the reason I'm doing service instead of the demo is because that's what the task is going to ask me for here in a second. So I'm just doing them both at the same time. And then we just want the name and the path name. We don't need everything they're going to give us. So you can see here, when you search that, it's going to give you the actual name of the path and the name of the file, okay? So now we see that this is the name of it. And then here's the actual file, THM tech service, okay? So we find the file name and its path. Now let's find more details using the get process. So what does this mean? Really, it means that, hey, we know that this process exists, but we don't know everything going on with it. We just know the name of it and the file that's running. We need to know what it actually is. So name, and then the name is THM service. Okay, so we run that. Maybe not. Maybe if I could type or spell process. What did I do here? All right, we'll figure that out here in a sec. Okay, so once we do that, then you're gonna actually get the process ID. The process ID here is what's important because that's what allows you to start searching. And when you search, you can search for, with NetStat, any connections that are to the outside. So if you think a process is sketchy, you think something's going on with it, you can get the process ID and you can search and say, hey, is this connecting to something outside? And if it is, what is it and why, right? That's when you start looking into it. So now, finally, we can see, try to apply this on the THM service, which is what we did. And so now we need to go ahead and find... All right, so now we need to go ahead and find the... Oh, that's why, because I have an underscore under process instead of a... There we go. All right, and then you can see here the process ID is 2708. Okay, now it's important that you know this because if you're following this guide or following me, your process ID is not going to be the same. So remember that, because the process ID is different every time it starts back up. So now we need to go ahead and take that process ID and say, okay, netstat. And we're going to say basically find string. And we're going to say find anything that's listening, because it doesn't have an active connection. So we just want to see what's it listening for and what's it listening. Basically, we want to say we're looking for any connection that's listening. And then we're going to put in this process ID, because it will then find any processes with that ID that are listening. Now, okay, hopefully that didn't actually terminate. Okay, so it didn't actually find them there. That's interesting. That's because I put 3212 and it's not 3212. It is 2708. All right, so you can see here it's listening, and it's listening on port 13337. Okay, so there it is, port 13337. That's what it's listening on. Okay, now if that doesn't make sense to you, what happened was basically we got the process ID, which you can get this very easily. You can just type in PS processes and get a list of them and find the one you want and do it this way. But this is a way that they're showing you to do it in a backdoor PowerShell setting. So here, netstat, it shows all of your network statistics. And then find string, we're looking for only things that are listening, because some will have inactive connections and some will be currently active. This one's just listening, and it's listening, and we have the actual process ID. So it's listening, and the process ID that is listening is 2708, and this is the port that it's listening on. Okay, so that's what we did. Now visit the local machine, local host on the port you found in question 1. Okay, perfect. So we'll go ahead and visit it, and they're just showing you that it's running on this. And it's funny because this actually already has one on it, so you could have just done it this way. Someone messed up, whoever was on this last. All right, and there you go. So you just went to localhost 13337, THM services enumerated. There's your flag. Perfect. Now we're going to perform a DNS zone transfer. Okay, so this is something that happens quite a bit. There's other ways to do this, but this is if you're doing it on the actual machine itself. So you're going to do ns lookup, which is a very common tool. And if you do .exe, it allows you to enter commands. You can see that here. So now we need to set the server. So we'll say server, and we're going to say 10.10.141.49. And you see it comes back with the default server. So that's telling us what server we want to use as our DNS zone lookup. And then we're going to say ls, -d, and thm red team. So we want to ask them, hey, I'll give you all my information if you give me all yours. That's what a zone transfer is. Now, I don't have any information to give it, but some will give you all their information. Now, keep in mind, this isn't everything most companies will have an external DNS and an internal. So you're going to only get the external facing stuff. Now you can see here, there's one that's called flag THM DNS 15 enumerated. Perfect. So this was a long one, guys, but I want to make sure I got this out to you this week, because I had some issues with my videos saving and stuff, so I want to make sure I got this to you guys this week. But that is it. Hopefully you guys liked it. There's a lot to this one, but this is some of the stuff that I think everybody misses when they get into security, especially if they go straight into security rather than get a job in IT or a system administrator position, or then work their way up into architect, engineer. People that don't do that, they miss a lot of this back end stuff. So hopefully this makes sense to you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. And once again, thank you guys for all the support. It's helped out tremendously. And don't forget about the contest that's happening starting Thanksgiving. If you have questions about that, hop in the Discord, check it out. Thanks, guys.